because Adrian Newey has just revealed something that completely changes the history of the AMR26. The car we saw in the test was not the final version. It was not even complete. And that means that Aston Martin could arrive at the Australian Grand Prix with a very different car, with a much more aggressive package of improvements than many imagine. But this is where the situation becomes really interesting, and also dangerous for the team. Newey has made it clear that the plan was always to sacrifice some of the initial performance to validate the car's aerodynamic concept and understand how the new solutions work on the track. In other words, Aston Martin decided to hide its true potential during testing to prepare a big evolution specifically for Melbourne. The key point to understanding what Aston Martin can present in Australia begins with a direct confession from Adrian Newey that has gone unnoticed by many fans, but which actually perfectly explains why the team seemed so discreet during the preseason. According to the British engineer himself, the AMR26 that we saw running in the first tests did not represent the real car that Aston Martin wants to compete with at the start of the championship. That version was just a base, a first iteration of a much more complex aerodynamic concept that was not yet fully deployed. In fact, within the team itself it was recognized that several important parts of the car were provisional and that the real objective of those first kilometers was not to seek absolute performance, but to validate fundamental data between the wind tunnel, the simulator, and the real behavior on the track. This explains why the AMR26 project has been built under a very different philosophy than that usually adopted by other teams at the start of the season. While many teams try to reach the first Grand Prix with the most optimized aerodynamic package possible, Aston Martin decided to follow a much more strategic approach. The plan was to sacrifice some of the car's potential during testing to understand precisely how the new aerodynamic concept works, especially in key aspects such as mass distribution, the balance between high and low load, and the interaction between the suspension and the aerodynamic flow of the ground. For Newey, this process was absolutely necessary before unleashing the car's true potential, because only after validating all those parameters could they introduce the package of improvements that was reserved specifically for the Australian Grand Prix. And here appears one of the most interesting elements of the project. Newey himself has insisted on several occasions that the car that will run in Melbourne will be very different from the one we initially saw on the track. This is not an exaggeration or a marketing phrase. According to the team's internal statements, the AMR26 that will debut at Albert Park will incorporate important changes in fundamental areas of the car, especially in the floor, the diffuser, and the aerodynamic system that controls the lateral airflow. These areas are absolutely critical in modern Formula One, because they determine how efficiently the car generates downforce without penalizing straight-line speed too much. In other words, the package Aston Martin is preparing for Australia is not just a minor update, but an evolution designed to unlock performance that the original concept had not yet shown. Furthermore, the development of the car is also closely linked to another element that can mark the behavior of the AMR26 during the season: the integration of the new Honda hybrid system. An important part of the team's technical work has focused on energy management and how to distribute the delivery of electrical power to improve traction at corner exit. This aspect is especially important at circuits like Albert Park, where acceleration zones after slow or medium corners can make big differences in lap time. For this reason, Aston Martin has also been working on specific adjustments to the electric torque maps and the thermal management of the hybrid system, seeking a more progressive power delivery that allows stability in long runs without compromising the reliability of the set. However, this ambitious strategy also opens the door to a series of risks that Newey himself has not hidden. When a car introduces so many new features at the same time, there is always the possibility that some areas of the project are not yet fully optimized. The correlation between simulations and real behavior can fail, new aerodynamic parts can generate unexpected effects on the balance of the car, and the integration of complex systems such as the hybrid can create temperature or consistency problems during long runs. On a semi-permanent street circuit like Albert Park, where conditions change rapidly and the margin for error is minimal, any small misalignment can become a serious problem during the race weekend. That is why the Australian Grand Prix is presented as a kind of real test for the Aston Martin project. It will not only be the moment in which we will see for the first time the true potential of the AMR26, but also the stage where Adrian Newey's technical commitment will be put to the test. If everything works as the team expects, the car could show a very significant jump in performance compared to what was seen in the preseason. But if any of the key elements of the package do not perform as planned, the start of the season could quickly turn into a much more complicated weekend than Aston Martin had planned. The next step in this story takes us directly to the technical heart of the Aston Martin project, because the improvements that Adrian Newey and his team are preparing for the Australian Grand Prix are not simply minor tweaks, but a package designed to unlock the true performance of the AMR 26. During the last few weeks, a very clear idea has been repeated within the team. The car that appeared in the shakedown was only an incomplete version of the concept, with provisional parts in critical areas of the car. This means that the true starting point of the project will be seen for the first time in Melbourne, when the car incorporates a much more refined evolution in its aerodynamics, especially in the floor and the diffuser, two of the most decisive elements for generating load in current cars. The floor will probably be the most important piece within this package. In modern Formula One, much of the downforce is generated thanks to ground effect, and so any modification in that area can completely transform the behavior of the car. In the case of the AMR 26, engineers have worked on a redesign of the floor edges and a more efficient sealing of the lateral airflow. The aim is to more precisely control how air is directed towards the rear diffuser, increasing aerodynamic stability when the car enters fast or medium corners. These types of improvements not only increase the load, they also make the car more predictable for the driver, something essential to squeeze out performance in qualifying and maintain consistency in long runs. The diffuser is also a central part of this evolution. Newey has always paid special attention to this area because it is one of the points where aerodynamic efficiency can be gained without penalizing top speed too much. In the package prepared for Australia, the diffuser has been optimized to improve flow stability when the car changes direction or when passing through medium-fast support areas. This is particularly relevant at a circuit like Albert Park, where pace is built through sequences of fluid corners combined with strong accelerations. If the diffuser manages to maintain stable flow under these conditions, the AMR 26 could show a significant improvement in overall balance and confidence for pilots. But the package doesn't end there. Aston Martin has also worked on adjustments to the front and rear wing to improve the overall efficiency of the car. The intention is to find a balance that allows maintaining enough load under slow braking and cornering, but without sacrificing speed on the straights. This type of aerodynamic optimization is key at Albert Park, because the circuit combines very different sectors. Areas where you need stability under hard braking and others where top speed can make important differences in overtaking. That's why the team has sought an aerodynamic compromise that allows the car to perform well on the entire track, rather than focusing solely on one specific type of corner. However, behind all these improvements there is also a concern that Newey himself has hinted at. When you introduce so many evolutions simultaneously, the car can become much more sensitive to small configuration changes. A more aggressive floor, an optimized diffuser, and new energy management can generate great benefits, but they can also narrow the operating window of the car. If the team does not quickly find the right balance in the setup, the car could become unwieldy or inconsistent over the weekend. And at a street circuit like Albert Park, where practice time is limited and track conditions evolve rapidly, that could seriously complicate the work of engineers and drivers. All of this means that the Australian package not only represents an opportunity for Aston Martin to make a competitive leap, but also a litmus test for Adrian Newey's technical approach. If the new parts work as expected, the AMR 26 could show very different performance than what we saw in preseason. But if any of these elements don't fit perfectly into the package, the team could find itself struggling to understand the car just as the first race of the year begins. And that is why the Australian Grand Prix will be much more than the first race of the year for Aston Martin. It will be the moment when we will know if Newey's strategy has really worked. If the aerodynamic package fits, if the hybrid management responds as expected, and if the car manages to maintain stability throughout the weekend, the AMR 26 could surprise many from the start of the season. But if any of those elements fail, then Melbourne could reveal the first problems of a project that, although promising a lot, has yet to prove that it can perform under the real pressure of a Formula One weekend. Let me know in the comments what you think about all this.